We often mistakenly believe that having a father who is the President of the United States and growing up beneath the lights of a golden age is a universal ticket to happiness. But the ironic truth is this: money cannot protect you from collapse from within, and the price of privilege can sometimes be an unbearable pain. Would you dare trade for outward glamour but hidden tragedy when artistic dreams are suffocated by the blind love of a powerful father and devastating losses continue to strike right at the doorstep of a luxurious Park Avenue apartment? Margaret Truman's story began from a starting point that was far from the glittering glamour of elite society. She was born on February 17, 1924, in the town of Independence, Missouri. Unlike the long-established, powerful families of America's East Coast, who were surrounded by luxury and inherited privileges, the Truman family chose a simple and quiet life inside a Victorian-style house on peaceful North Delaware Street. Her father, Harry S. Truman, had originally been nothing more than a hard-working farmer, a former artillery captain who had survived the fires of World War I and had even carried the burden of lingering debt for many years after the bitter failure of a men's clothing business. In contrast, her mother, Bess Wallace, a woman from a respected local family, always maintained an extremely reserved and withdrawn attitude toward the outside world. As the only child raised under such protection, Margaret's childhood passed through gentle melodies as her father passionately played the piano while his little daughter stood beside him and sang with a clear voice. But that pure peace came to a permanent end in 1934, when Harry was elected to the United States Senate. From that fateful moment onward, Margaret's life was torn into two completely different halves. One half of the year consisted of ordinary days, attending public school in her hometown of Missouri with childhood friends, while the other half became bewildered steps into Gunston Hall, a private girls' school in Washington, D.C., where her classmates were none other than the children of diplomats, cabinet officials, and prominent tycoons. In January 1944, while the darkness of World War II was spreading across all of America, 19-year-old student Margaret was brought onto a ceremonial platform for the first time to carry out a major symbolic duty, where she personally smashed a bottle of champagne to launch the 45,000-ton battleship USS Missouri at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. After the grand ceremony and attending a brightly illuminated Broadway performance, a very real and exhausting detail was recorded. Margaret and two of her college friends fell asleep in their seats while eating dessert at the luxurious Waldorf Astoria Hotel because of their overwhelming travel schedule. A few months later, in the summer of 1944, Harry Truman was selected as the running mate of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and officially assumed office as vice president of a world power. But this period of enjoying fame was extremely short-lived, as the Truman family spent only 82 days in that position before the wheel of history suddenly turned on April 12, 1945. President Franklin D. Roosevelt suddenly passed away. When Harry Truman arrived at the White House in shock, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt placed her hand on his shoulder and said in a sorrowful voice, "Harry, the president has died." When he asked through his grief whether there was anything he could do to help, Eleanor responded with a deeply foreboding statement. "Is there anything we can do for you? Because you are the one in trouble now." That very evening, the former county judge and former poor farmer from Missouri officially took the oath as the 33rd President of the United States. And Margaret Truman immediately entered the White House. Stepping through the majestic doors of the White House, Margaret held all the privileges of a first daughter. But at the same time, she also stepped into a golden cage where privacy was completely stripped away. In 1945, the most powerful residence in America was still adjusting to the presence of a young and unmarried president's daughter living inside it. It had been a very long time since the American public had witnessed such a situation, because the children of former President Roosevelt had all grown up and moved out long ago. Suddenly, every outfit she wore, every statement she made, and every smallest action Margaret took was exposed by the press under the microscope of public scrutiny. Faced with this suffocating pressure, her mother, Bess Truman, openly displayed her dislike for the so-called outward glamour but hidden tragedy of political life. She maintained an extreme level of privacy, to the point of placing a burn basket beside her desk and personally destroying hundreds of personal letters to prevent anyone from intruding into the family's private life. Margaret, however, demonstrated much stronger social skills by using the opportunity to meet diplomats, military generals, journalists, and major artists. Being the president's daughter brought an invisible form of power, but the price of that privilege was absolute surveillance, without a single moment of rest. Secret Service agents followed her through every schedule, and historical records noted that security personnel frequently interrupted or directly interfered with her personal dates. The privacy of a young woman was crushed in exchange for the mission of protecting national security. Despite being confined under strict supervision, Margaret was far from being a passive figure or merely a decoration for political powers. In 1948, President Harry Truman faced an extremely fierce re-election campaign, as every public opinion poll unanimously predicted that he would suffer a devastating defeat against New York Governor Thomas Dewey, and Life magazine had even printed Dewey's image on its cover in advance with the confident caption, "The next President of the United States." Faced with such a critical situation, Margaret became a strategic political asset when she boarded the armored train car named Ferdinand Magellan and accompanied her father on the 30,000-mile whistle-stop campaign across the United States. Whenever the train stopped at stations along the route, President Truman would stand on the platform at the rear of the train and deliver speeches in his firm voice, while Margaret always appeared beside him with a radiant smile. Her smiling presence and waving to the crowds successfully softened the image of a president who was being forced to make difficult decisions at the dawn of the Cold War. The public saw in them the image of an ideal American family, a symbol of unity, and that was one of the reasons Harry Truman achieved one of the most remarkable political upsets in history. Unwilling to let her entire identity and life remain tied to the immense shadow of her powerful father, Margaret quietly prepared herself for a much greater ambition, conquering the stage as a professional opera singer. This plan was not a temporary impulse of a privileged young woman, because from the age of 16, she had seriously studied vocal training with Thomas J. Strickler in her hometown of Independence. Margaret's voice belonged to the coloratura soprano range, a musical foundation that demanded absolute flexibility and years of strict, almost punishing technical training. After moving to New York and Washington, she continued her studies with Estelle Liebling, the vocal teacher of renowned opera singer Beverly Sills, and even more remarkably, she managed to persuade Helen Traubel, one of the leading dramatic sopranos of the Metropolitan Opera, to personally train her. Amid a packed schedule of diplomatic events and lavish state dinners, Where she was expected to play the role of a billionaire heiress of power, she still withdrew into practice rooms for grueling vocal sessions. Money cannot protect you from the ruthless standards of art, and Margaret understood that better than anyone. To ensure that the public would judge her true abilities rather than seeing only the label of the president's daughter, Margaret's team designed an extremely clever and confidential debut strategy. In March 1947, her first professional concert did not take place before a live audience, but was instead broadcast on national radio with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra under the direction of conductor Carl Kruger. At that time, radio served as a curtain made of sound, concealing the lava of her political influence and forcing critics to focus entirely on her voice. From the little White House in Key West, Florida, her parents quietly followed the broadcast while carrying their own silent struggles about their daughter's future. Soon afterward, major newspapers, including the New York Times, published reviews acknowledging her pleasant voice and her musical intelligence. Building on the momentum of her radio successes, on August 23, 1947, the 23-year-old woman officially stepped out of the shadows to face a crowd at the legendary Hollywood Bowl outdoor stage. Wearing a pure white dress with a gardenia flower in her hair, she raised her voice before an audience of nearly 20,000 people who watched in complete anticipation. This magnificent performance opened the way for a nationwide tour covering approximately 30 major cities. And the peak of those years pursuing art came in November 1949, when she appeared at Carnegie Hall in New York to perform a program combining both classical and modern works. Reviews during this golden age period continuously praised her confidence, charisma, and professionalism in television appearances and performances with some of America's largest symphony orchestras. Yet, behind the enthusiastic praise and newspaper articles written in polite language, the media system always concealed a bitter, objective truth. Were music critics truly impressed by her vocal technique? Or were they simply avoiding the risk of criticizing the only daughter of the sitting president? The cruel answer arrived on the night of December 5, 1950. On that day, she stepped onto the prestigious stage of Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. to perform what would become the most important concert of her life. Beneath the auditorium glowing with crystal lights sat not only the city's elite and her parents, but also a distinguished guest, British Prime Minister Clement Attlee, who was visiting to discuss the Korean War. The performance ended with what seemed like endless applause filling the luxurious hall. But by the next morning, all of the outward glamour immediately revealed itself when 34-year-old music critic Paul Hume of the Washington Post published his review. He bluntly wrote that Margaret looked extremely attractive on stage, but that she frequently sang off-key, completely lacked the skills of a professional singer, and showed no sign of improvement over the years. It may have been a fair assessment from the perspective of a music professional, but for Margaret, those cold words became a devastating public blow, exposing the truth that money cannot protect you from the ruthless standards of genuine artistic merit. However, the event that transformed this situation into a worldwide scandal did not come from journalist Paul Hume, but from a handwritten letter filled with the anger of a father. That morning, President Harry Truman read the review in the Washington Post. At that time, he was already carrying the immense pressure of the Korean War and had just received news that his childhood friend and White House press secretary, Charlie Ross, had suddenly died that same day. Faced with the public criticism of his daughter, the most powerful president in the world took White House stationery and personally wrote a threatening letter directly to Paul Hume. In the letter, he called Hume a man with 8 ulcers but only the salary of 4, and openly threatened that if they ever met face to face, Hume would need a new nose and a lot of beefsteak to place over his blackened eyes. When the letter was leaked to the rival newspaper Washington News, American public opinion immediately became deeply divided. More than 80% of the letters sent to the White House defended the actions of a father protecting his daughter. But politicians and the elite were horrified that a sitting president had used his power to threaten violence against a citizen. Margaret, who was on tour in Nashville at the time, stood before reporters and publicly stated that Paul Hume was a good critic and that he had every right to write whatever he wanted. Through this remarkably composed response, she skillfully extinguished the flames of controversy. But the scandal surrounding her father's letter permanently marked the end of her opera career, because from that moment on, audiences no longer listened to her voice with purely musical ears. Could there be any greater pain than seeing a child's dream destroyed by the blind love of a powerful father? Instead of disappearing from the public eye after her failure in the press, this woman carried out a remarkable comeback on an entirely different stage. In 1953, when her father's presidential term ended, Margaret left Washington, D.C., moved to New York City, and quickly signed a contract with NBC Radio and Television. No longer an opera singer struggling painfully to prove her talent, she began to reveal her natural gift in broadcasting. She became the co-host of a daily radio program called Weekday, alongside renowned journalist Mike Wallace, personally delivering news reports and conducting interviews aimed at a female audience. Her sharp instincts and charm helped her move further into television, becoming a familiar guest face on many of the popular programs of that era. American audiences were especially impressed when she took a seat as a panelist on the famous television game show, What's My Line? Sitting alongside major figures in the industry, such as Dorothy Kilgallen and Bennett Cerf. On national television, people no longer saw a president's daughter, overwhelmed by criticism, but instead a Margaret Truman who was articulate, confident, and earning the salary of a true media personality. That was how she began repairing the shattered dreams of her past. The peak of her television career did not take place in a glamorous studio in New York, but rather in the simple living room of her own family home. On May 27, 1955, she was entrusted with the responsibility of replacing legendary journalist Edward R. Murrow as host of the famous television program, Person to Person. In this historic broadcast, Margaret brought television cameras directly into her family home in Independence and personally conducted an interview with her own parents. She asked former President Harry Truman to sit at the piano and play Paderewski's Minuet, the very piece he had once personally performed for Joseph Stalin during the Potsdam Conference. Using the skills of a professional journalist, she asked some of the most direct questions, asking her father what had been the most difficult decision of his presidency, leading him to speak about the Korean War, and asking how he wished to be remembered by history. By bringing cameras into the home, Margaret took away the media's power to judge, reshape the image and legacy of her family with her own hands, and gained complete control of the narrative before millions of American viewers. While standing at the peak of her independence and fame in New York, a chance encounter led Margaret's life onto a surprisingly quiet and ordinary path. In 1955, she met Clifton Daniel, a veteran journalist 12 years older than she was. Unlike men who were overwhelmed by the label of being the former president's daughter, Clifton was a seasoned individual who had served as a war correspondent during World War II and had held positions as a foreign correspondent for the New York Times in London, Moscow, and the Middle East. His strong personal career and achievements made him a completely equal partner to Margaret. Their relationship avoided the noisy attention of the press and unfolded only through dinners and quiet conversations, far away from the silent struggles of the outside world. On April 21, 1956, the couple officially married at Trinity Episcopal Church in her hometown of Independence, with former President Harry Truman personally walking his daughter down the aisle. Margaret appeared radiant in an elegant wedding dress designed by renowned Italian fashion designer Nicole Fontana. This marriage marked a decisive turning point in her life. Exactly 1 year after the wedding, in 1957, Margaret officially retired from her music career, closing a turbulent chapter of her life in order to embrace her own simple happiness. Behind the doors of a spacious apartment on Park Avenue in New York, the woman who had once been scrutinized by the entire world was determined to build an impenetrable fortress to protect her family. She gave birth to 4 sons for Clifton: Clifton Truman, William Wallace, Harrison Gates, and Thomas Washington. Having personally experienced a childhood followed by media attention ever since her father became a senator when she was 10 years old, Margaret deeply understood the devastating effects of fame and the price of privilege that a child is forced to bear. She established a strict rule that her children would never become political props or targets for media exploitation. The 4 boys were raised and educated in New York, enjoying an ordinary childhood, completely separated from the shadow of having a grandfather who had been president. While her husband, Clifton, advanced in his career to become the influential managing editor of the New York Times, Margaret participated in social activities in New York as the wife of a prominent journalist. Although she continued attending events and serving on various boards, all of her time and focus during this period were devoted entirely to maintaining stability and absolute privacy for their home on Park Avenue, a quiet world completely separated from the secret world of old wealthy elites filled with traps and controversy. But have you ever imagined that a former first daughter, born into America's world of privilege, would choose to write fictional murder novels about the highest institutions of power and earn millions of dollars from them? The story of Margaret Truman's turning point in middle age proved something remarkable. She was not simply a woman willing to fade away while living on the glory of the past, but a sharp strategist who knew how to transform her own royal memories into a celebrated commercial empire. In 1980, at the age of 56, she astonished the publishing world when she released a mystery novel titled Murder in the White House. The book immediately became a literary sensation, opening the door for a series called Capital Crimes that eventually spanned 25 novels. The greatest attraction of this series was not sophisticated writing techniques, but the chilling authenticity of someone who had once stood at the very peak of power. Anyone could write a thriller, but only Margaret Truman could accurately describe the layout of the White House. At 3 in the morning, the secret elevators reserved for senators, or the strict weapons screening procedures inside FBI headquarters. Readers bought the books because they wanted a thrilling behind-the-scenes tour from the only person who had truly lived inside that residence. Her son Clifton even jokingly shared that his mother did not seem to hold much affection for most politicians in Washington, so she chose an extremely dramatic way of dealing with them by writing them into her books one by one. However, behind that vast legacy and all of its outward glamour, the media system concealed a highly controversial objective truth. Several years after her death, professional writer Donald Bain admitted in 2014 that he had actually been the writer behind 27 novels in the series. And before him, another writer, William Harrington, had made a similar claim. In reality, Margaret served as a creative director, personally selecting settings, shaping storylines, and providing the most valuable insider details, while other writers completed the narrative framework. Despite those hidden aspects, no one can deny that she created an extraordinary business model, transforming the label of President's Daughter, which had once caused her so much trouble, into a highly profitable brand within the secret world of long-established, wealthy elites. But real life has never been a novel where endings can be arranged so easily, and the year 2000 brought devastating shocks that completely overturned the peaceful path she had spent years building. First, on February 21st, 2000, the man who had stood beside her through 44 years of her youth, Clifton Daniel, passed away at the age of 87 due to complications from a stroke. Her entire adult life had been tied to this man, from the peak years of her career to the quiet years devoted to caring for her family in their apartment on historic Park Avenue. His passing, though an unavoidable law of nature, still left within her a vast emptiness that nothing could fill. Yet before the pain of widowhood had even begun to fade, a second tragedy struck like a cruel destiny only 6 months later. At 2:40 a.m. on September 4th, 2000, her second son, William Wallace Daniel, 41 years old, was walking across Park Avenue at the intersection with East 76th Street when he was struck by a taxi and died from severe injuries at New York Hospital. The most heartbreaking and merciless part was that the accident happened only a few steps away from Margaret's apartment building, where the presence of death blended into the cold night of the elite neighborhood. William was a devoted social worker at the New York State Psychiatric Institute at Columbia University, a man who had dedicated his career to easing the silent struggles of patients suffering from severe mental illness. Losing both her life partner and her beloved son within only 6 months was a pain beyond endurance for any woman. Her eldest son, Clifton, later recalled that his mother had been completely devastated by these two enormous losses, yet she still maintained the traditional habit of the Truman family, holding her head high and keeping every tear hidden inside. Margaret did not appear in tearful television interviews, nor did she speak to newspapers about her tragedy. Instead, she withdrew into the complete privacy of her family, continued publishing books, worked with her father's library, and faced reality with quiet resilience, like a silent aristocratic shadow. A woman who had once stood beneath tens of thousands of dazzling stage lights and the attention of global media ultimately chose a surprisingly lonely ending when the later years of life arrived. The luxurious New York apartment where she had lived for 41 years had now become too large and empty after the deaths of her husband and son, leaving behind only the echoes of distant memories. Realizing that her health was steadily declining, in May 2007, Margaret made a difficult decision to leave New York and move to Chicago to live near her eldest son, Clifton. Leaving behind the place that had held her youth, her happy marriage, and the raising of her 4 children meant that she was officially closing a long chapter of her life. One filled with brilliance, but also with tears. In her final days, she was cared for at a medical facility in Chicago and had to rely on a ventilator while fighting a severe infection. She passed away on January 29, 2008, at the age of 83. Her ashes were later returned to her hometown of Independence, Missouri, where she was laid to rest beside her husband, Clifton, and her parents on the grounds of the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library. Margaret Truman passed away, but what she left behind was far more than the prestigious identity of being a former president's daughter. She was the first modern first daughter, bold enough to break traditional expectations and build an independent career in television and publishing, personally writing outstanding biographies that helped restore the historical image of her father. She transformed a life marked by public scrutiny, surrounded by political pressure and overwhelming personal pain, into proof of the independence and resilient strength of a woman courageous enough to determine her own fate and find her final hidden world of traditional wealthy families filled with traps and complications. Looking back on Margaret Truman's 83-year journey filled with upheaval, from a simple little girl living in a Victorian house in Missouri to a woman who stirred the media world of New York, we are forced to ask ourselves, was glory determined by bloodline truly worth the suffocating scrutiny of an entire lifetime? Did titles such as Dollar Princess or Billionaire Heiress truly bring genuine peace when every step was watched by Secret Service agents and every crack within the soul was exposed before the public? We often stand on the outside admiring the outward glamour, but how many truly understand the tragedy hidden behind it? Margaret's story is not a warning about failure, but proof of a silent struggle to reclaim freedom. She proved that money cannot protect you from the unbearable pains of human life, and that the greatest happiness is not possessing a grand legacy, but having the courage to step out from its shadow and determine your own destiny. When her ashes quietly came to rest within the grounds of the Presidential Library, what the world remembered was not the image of a daughter standing beside power, but a woman who had lived, suffered, and triumphed through the strength of her own name. Her identity was the one thing that was never buried beneath the shattered dreams of a dynasty. Every story about the hidden world of traditional wealthy families is like a mirror, helping us recognize the value of the simple things we already possess. If you also feel a deep connection to these hidden stories, please press the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support is the motivation that allows us to continue uncovering the secrets of the elite class in future episodes. Do not forget to leave a comment about the moment that moved you the most in today's story. Thank you for listening, and we will see you again in the next sad yet proud biographical journeys.